The massive crystalline dome of Concordia Prime had never witnessed such chaos. Emergency lights pulsed in rhythmic patterns across the translucent walls while alien voices rose in concerned chatter throughout the vast amphitheater. Representatives from dozens of species filled their designated sections, their various forms creating a bizarre tapestry of galactic civilization. Ambassador Valdar stood at the central podium, his tall, gray-skinned form trembling slightly as he gripped the speaking platform. The hegemony's most decorated diplomat had never appeared so shaken. His usually pristine uniform bore wrinkles, and his large, dark eyes darted nervously across the assembled crowd. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice carrying the weight of terrible news. "I stand before you today to report an unprecedented disaster. Our 7th Fleet, comprising 247 vessels including 3 Dreadnought-class warships, has vanished without trace." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. The hegemony's 7th Fleet was legendary across the galaxy, having conquered 17 worlds in the past decade alone. Their disappearance seemed impossible. Valdar continued, his voice growing steadier as he delivered the facts. 3 standard cycles ago, the fleet entered the Sol system to begin subjugation protocols on the 3rd planet, designated Terra 3 in our star charts. Initial reconnaissance had identified the inhabitants as a young species called humans, possessing only primitive nuclear technology and basic chemical propulsion systems. Counselor Nexra of the Titan Collective rose from her seat, her massive rock-like form casting shadows across nearby representatives. "Ambassador Valdar, are you suggesting that a pre-spaceflight civilization somehow destroyed your entire fleet? This is beyond belief." "I am not suggesting anything, Counselor," Valdar replied tersely. "I am stating facts. Our last communication from Fleet Admiral Zorkan was a routine progress report as they approached the human homeworld. Since then, complete silence. No distress signals, no emergency beacons, nothing." The chamber erupted in confused conversations as representatives discussed this impossible development among themselves. The hegemony had been the galaxy's dominant military force for over 3 centuries. Their warships carried planet-cracking weapons capable of shattering entire worlds, and their soldiers were genetically enhanced for warfare. Representative Kixla of the Peaceful Harmony World spoke up, her melodic voice cutting through the noise. "Perhaps there was a technical malfunction? Space travel can be dangerous, especially near unknown stellar phenomena." Valdar shook his head grimly. "Our initial surveys detected no unusual stellar activity in the Sol system. The star is stable and there are no black holes, neutron stars, or other hazardous objects in the region. The system appeared completely ordinary." Elder Quintar of the Ancient Assembly leaned forward, his centuries of experience evident in his measured words. "In my long life I have seen many strange things across the galaxy. Young civilizations sometimes possess hidden defenses or unexpected allies. Perhaps these humans received assistance from another spacefaring species. Our intelligence networks show no indication of any advanced species operating in that region," Valdar responded. "The humans appear to be completely alone, with no knowledge of galactic civilization whatsoever." The tension in the chamber grew thicker as representatives struggled to comprehend the situation. The hegemony had built their empire on the principle that superior technology always triumphed over primitive resistance. Their conquest protocols had never failed before. Admiral Torven of the Republic Defense Force stood up, his military bearing evident even in the diplomatic setting. "Ambassador, what exactly did your fleet's mission parameters include? Was this a standard conquest operation?" Valdar nodded. "Standard Protocol 7, orbital bombardment of military installations, followed by ground invasion and establishment of colonial administration. The humans were to be given the usual choice between submission or extinction." "And you detected no weapons capable of threatening your vessels during the initial survey?" Admiral Torven pressed. "Nothing beyond primitive missiles and aircraft. Their most advanced weapons appeared to be nuclear devices, which pose no threat to our shielded warships," Valdar admitted, his confusion evident. Counselor Jexra of the Trade Federation raised a tentacle-like appendage. "Could there have been a communication breakdown? Perhaps your fleet is simply unable to transmit messages due to interference." "Impossible," Valdar replied firmly. "Our communication systems operate across multiple frequencies and dimensions. No natural phenomenon could block all our channels simultaneously." The chamber fell silent as the full implications of the situation became clear. Somehow, someway, a primitive human civilization had either destroyed or captured the galaxy's most powerful military fleet. The very foundation of galactic power structures was being questioned. Elder Mexlon of the Wisdom Council spoke in his ancient, crackling voice. There is only one way to discover the truth. We must send another expedition to investigate. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly, though many representatives looked uncomfortable with the idea. If the mighty hegemony fleet could vanish, what hope did a smaller investigation force have? Veldar straightened his uniform and addressed the council with renewed determination. The hegemony requests immediate authorization for a reconnaissance mission to the Sol system. We must discover what happened to our fleet and assess the true nature of this human threat. Threat? Counselor Nexare laughed, a sound like grinding stone. You speak as if these primitives could actually challenge galactic civilization. 3 days ago I would have agreed with you, Veldar replied quietly. Today I am not so certain. The vote was unanimous. Within hours, the reconnaissance vessel Silent Watcher would depart for the Sol system, carrying with it the hopes and fears of an entire galaxy suddenly uncertain about its place in the universe. Captain Rickson had served in the Galactic Navy for 37 standard years, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for what awaited in the Sol system. The Silent Watcher moved silently through the darkness of space, its advanced sensors scanning every fragment of debris floating in the void. The first discovery came at the edge of the asteroid belt. Sensor technician Yelka called out from her station, her voice tight with disbelief. Captain, I am detecting metallic debris at coordinates 77 Alpha. The metal signature matches hegemony battle steel. Rickson moved to the main viewing screen as the ship's cameras focused on the wreckage. What he saw made his blood run cold. Massive chunks of twisted metal drifted slowly through space, each piece bearing the distinctive markings of hegemony warships. But the damage patterns were unlike anything he had ever seen. These hull breaches, whispered Science Officer Kolma as he analyzed the readings. The metal has been punctured by projectiles moving at incredible speeds. But look at these energy burns. No known weapon creates this type of signature. The Silent Watcher continued deeper into the system, finding more debris fields with each passing hour. Entire sections of hegemony dreadnoughts floated like massive tombstones, their thick armor plating torn open as if by some impossible force. Captain, Yelka called again, her voice even more strained. You need to see this. I am detecting artificial structures in orbit around the third planet. Large structures that were not there during the original survey. Rickson felt his heart sink as the long-range sensors revealed the truth. Earth was surrounded by a ring of space stations and defensive platforms, each one bristling with weapons that seemed to blend human and hegemony technology. The primitive world that should have fallen in hours had somehow transformed itself into a fortress. How is this possible? Kolma muttered as he studied the readings. The survey was conducted only 6 months ago. These installations would take years to build, even with advanced technology. The answer came as 3 sleek vessels emerged from behind one of Earth's moons. They moved with purpose and precision, their hulls displaying a strange mixture of human and alien design elements. Unlike the crude chemical rockets the humans were supposed to possess, these ships moved with the smooth efficiency of advanced fusion drives. Unknown vessel, came a transmission in perfect galactic standard. You are entering Earth territorial space. Please identify yourself and state your intentions. Rickson exchanged glances with his officers. The humans were not only aware of galactic civilization, they were speaking the common language with fluency that suggested months or years of study. This is Captain Rickson of the reconnaissance vessel Silent Watcher, he replied cautiously. We are investigating the disappearance of a hegemony fleet in this system. Understood, Captain Rickson. Please follow our escort vessels to Luna Station for discussions. Any aggressive action will be met with defensive measures. The human ships took positions around the Silent Watcher, their weapons powered but not targeted. Rickson noticed that these weapons appeared to be modified hegemony energy cannons, somehow integrated into human ship designs. As they approached Earth's moon, Rickson saw something that made his mind reel. A massive space station had been constructed in lunar orbit, its design clearly showing elements of captured hegemony technology. Docking bays that should have taken decades to build were filled with ships that looked like a perfect fusion of human innovation and alien engineering. Captain, Communications Officer Nex 6 reported quietly, I am detecting multiple languages being spoken throughout their communication networks. It appears they have liberated prisoners from the hegemony fleet and integrated them into their society. The docking procedure was handled with professional efficiency that impressed even Rickson's experienced crew. Human technicians worked alongside aliens who should have been prisoners or slaves, all of them displaying the kind of cooperation that took most species centuries to achieve. Admiral Jean waited for them in the station's main conference room, flanked by a diverse group that included humans and several species that Rickson recognized as former hegemony subjects. The human leader was younger than Rickson had expected, with calm eyes that missed nothing. "Welcome to Luna Station, Captain," Admiral Jean said politely. "I apologize for the circumstances that brought you here, but I assume you want to know what happened to the hegemony fleet." "That would be appreciated," Rickson replied carefully, still trying to process everything he had seen. Admiral Jean gestured to the viewing window, where Earth hung like a blue jewel against the stars. "When your hegemony friends arrived, they made the mistake of giving us an ultimatum. 72 hours to surrender or face extinction. They probably thought they were being generous." A human technician activated a holographic display showing the timeline of events. Rickson watched in amazement as the reconstruction showed human forces adapting to alien technology with impossible speed. "In those 72 hours, Admiral Jean continued, our engineers managed to reverse engineer their shield generators, improve their weapon systems and develop countermeasures for their tactics. We also discovered that many of their crew members were not willing participants in their empire." The display showed human ships using captured hegemony technology to disable rather than destroy the invading fleet. Boarding parties had rescued thousands of enslaved aliens while capturing intact vessels for study. "You defeated the entire 7th Fleet in 3 days?" Rickson asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Jean nodded calmly. "We prefer to think of it as a rescue operation. The hegemony fleet came here to conquer and enslave. Instead, they provided us with the tools we needed to protect ourselves and free others." Rickson realized that the galaxy had just changed forever, and this small blue world was at the center of that transformation. The conference room on Luna Station felt cold and sterile, its metal walls reflecting the bright overhead lights. Captain Rickson sat across from Admiral Jean, trying to hide his nervousness as he studied the human leader. The man appeared calm and relaxed, as if discussing the destruction of an entire fleet was nothing more than routine business. Commander Hannah stood beside a large holographic projector, her fingers dancing over the control interface. She was younger than Admiral Jean, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the alien visitors' reactions. "Before we begin," Admiral Jean said politely, "would you like something to drink? We have learned to prepare beverages suitable for most galactic species during our recent interactions with your former prisoners." Captain Rickson shook his head, too stunned by the casual mention of liberated hegemony forces to focus on refreshments. His science officer Kolma leaned forward with obvious curiosity, while communications officer Nex 6 remained silent and watchful. "Very well," Admiral Jean continued. "Commander Hannah will show you exactly what happened when the hegemony fleet arrived at Earth." The holographic display came to life, showing a perfect three-dimensional recreation of Earth's solar system. Rickson watched as the familiar shapes of hegemony warships appeared at the edge of the projection, their massive forms dwarfing the small human installations that had existed at the time. "Day 1, Commander Hannah announced clearly. Fleet Admiral Zorkan broadcasts his demand for unconditional surrender. He gives humanity 72 hours to comply or face complete destruction." The projection showed the hegemony ships taking strategic positions around Earth, their weapons trained on major population centers. It was a standard intimidation tactic that had worked on hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. "This was their first mistake," Admiral Jean said quietly. "They assumed we would react like other species they had conquered. They expected fear, panic, and quick submission. Instead, the hologram showed something that made Captain Rickson's eyes widen in disbelief. Rather than cowering in terror, human ships began launching from every available facility. Not just military vessels but converted cargo haulers, mining ships, and even civilian transports hastily fitted with whatever weapons could be found. "Day 2, Commander Hannah continued. Our forces engaged the hegemony fleet in what they probably considered minor skirmishes. But we were not trying to win these battles. We were studying them." The display showed human ships deliberately sacrificing themselves to get close to hegemony vessels, their crews scanning and recording every detail of alien technology before their ships were destroyed. It was a level of tactical thinking that impressed even Rickson's military mind. "While our pilots were gathering intelligence," Admiral Jean explained, "our engineers were working around the clock. Every piece of debris, every energy signature, every transmission we intercepted was immediately analyzed and understood." Science Officer Kolma spoke up, his voice filled with skepticism. "Admiral, with respect, it takes our most advanced civilizations decades to understand new technologies. You are claiming your people mastered hegemony science in mere hours. Commander Hannah smiled and activated another section of the holographic display. Day 3 Hour 12. First successful test of reverse-engineered shield technology. The projection showed a human laboratory where teams of engineers worked frantically around captured hegemony equipment. Rickson watched in amazement as they not only copied the alien shield generators but actually improved upon the original design. Day 3 Hour 36. Hannah continued. Mass production begins. The display now showed human factories that had been completely retooled in a matter of hours. Assembly lines that should have taken months to set up were producing modified hegemony weapons at an incredible pace. This is impossible, Captain Rickson whispered. No species develops technology this quickly. Admiral Jean leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. Captain, you and your people have spent centuries perfecting gradual advancement. You take your time, test everything carefully, and make small improvements over many years. Humans are different. The holographic battle resumed, showing the final day of the conflict. Human ships, now equipped with improved versions of hegemony technology, swarmed the alien fleet like angry insects. Their tactics were unlike anything in the galactic military databases. We do not fight fair, Admiral Jean admitted bluntly. When our survival is threatened, we use every advantage we can find. We modify, we adapt, we improvise. The projection showed human boarding parties cutting through hegemony hulls with tools that had been invented mere hours before. Instead of killing the alien crews, they used advanced stunning weapons to capture them alive. Day 4, Commander Hannah announced. Hegemony Fleet Admiral Zorkan surrenders his remaining forces. Captain Rickson stared at the final images, which showed hegemony officers formally transferring control of their ships to human commanders. The proud alien warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds were now prisoners of the primitive species they had come to enslave. We discovered something interesting during our interrogations, Admiral Jean said casually. Most of your hegemony soldiers were not volunteers. They were conscripts from conquered worlds, forced to fight for an empire they hated. The display showed former hegemony troops working alongside humans, sharing technical knowledge and helping to strengthen Earth's defenses. It was a level of cooperation that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare and conquest. So you see, Captain, Admiral Jean concluded, the hegemony did not lose to superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They lost because they fundamentally misunderstood what humans become when you threaten our home. Rickson sat in stunned silence, realizing that the galaxy would never be the same again. These humans had not just won a battle, they had rewritten the rules of interstellar conflict. The Great Dome of Concordia Prime had never witnessed such chaos. Representatives from dozens of worlds shouted over each other, their various languages creating a cacophony that the translation systems could barely handle. Captain Rickson stood at the central podium, his report still echoing in the minds of every council member present. Ambassador Veldar of the hegemony sat in his designated section, his gray skin pale with shock. The proud empire that had dominated the galaxy for 3 centuries had been humbled by a species they had considered primitive. His hands shook as he gripped the armrests of his chair, unable to process the magnitude of the disaster. Order! Order! Elder Quintar called out, his ancient voice struggling to be heard above the commotion. The ceremonial staff in his weathered hands glowed with soft blue light, gradually bringing silence to the chamber. Ambassador Crevier of the Spiral Coalition was the first to speak coherently. Her insectoid features twitched with nervous energy as she addressed the assembly. Captain Rickson, please confirm what you have told us. These humans are actually offering full citizenship to former hegemony slaves. Rickson nodded grimly. Not only citizenship but positions of authority within their new government. I personally spoke with former hegemony soldiers who now serve as advisors in the Earth Defense Force. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. The concept was revolutionary. Throughout galactic history, conquered peoples were either enslaved, exterminated, or at best made into second-class citizens. The idea of immediately granting equal status to former enemies was unheard of. Counselor Nexare of the Titan Collective stood up, her massive stone-like form casting shadows across nearby representatives. This is more than unusual policy, Captain. You mentioned something about technology sharing? Yes, Counselor, Rickson replied, his voice heavy with the implications. The humans are actively teaching their rapid development techniques to liberated worlds. They have sent technical advisors to 17 former hegemony colonies that have declared independence in the past month alone. The chamber erupted again as representatives realized what this meant. The careful balance of power that had maintained galactic stability for millennia was crumbling. If primitive worlds could suddenly develop advanced technology in a matter of days rather than centuries, every assumption about interstellar politics would need to be reconsidered. Trade Representative Zixal of the Commerce Guild spoke up, his voice filled with concern. The economic implications alone are staggering. If every world can rapidly develop its own advanced industry, the entire foundation of interstellar trade could collapse. Admiral Torven of the Republic Defense Force leaned forward in his seat. Captain Rickson, did you observe any signs that the humans plan to use this advantage for conquest? Are they preparing to replace the hegemony as the galaxy's dominant power? Rickson shook his head slowly. If anything, Admiral, they seem remarkably uninterested in conquest. Their primary concern appears to be defensive preparation and the liberation of oppressed peoples. They have made no territorial demands and have avoided any aggressive actions beyond their own solar system. Yet, added Science Officer Kolma, who had accompanied Rickson to the podium, they have made it clear that any attempt to threaten Earth or their new allies will be met with the same fate as the hegemony fleet. The chamber fell into an uneasy silence as the full scope of the situation became clear. A new power had emerged in the galaxy, one that operated by completely different rules than any they had encountered before. The massive doors at the rear of the chamber suddenly opened with a soft hiss. All heads turned as a small procession entered the hall. The figure at the front was clearly human, a woman of medium height wearing simple diplomatic robes that bore no resemblance to the elaborate costumes favored by most galactic ambassadors. She walked with quiet confidence down the central aisle, flanked by two companions who were clearly not human. One appeared to be a former hegemony officer, his uniform modified with Earth insignia. The other was a being that Rickson recognized as belonging to a species the hegemony had enslaved decades ago. The woman reached the central speaking platform and waited patiently for the murmur of voices to die down. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "Honorable members of the Galactic Council," she began, her tone respectful but firm. "I am Ambassador Minji of the United Earth Government. We come before you today seeking membership in this august body, not as a protectorate or junior partner, but as a full and equal member of the galactic community." The silence that followed was absolute. Every representative in the chamber understood the implications of her words. This was not a request from a primitive world seeking protection or guidance. This was a demand for recognition from a power that had just demonstrated its ability to defeat the galaxy's strongest military force. Elder Quintar was the first to find his voice. "Ambassador Minji, the Council appreciates your direct approach. However, membership in this body requires certain qualifications and demonstrations of stability that typically take decades to achieve." Ambassador Minji smiled politely. "Elder Quintar, I believe recent events have demonstrated that humanity operates on a somewhat accelerated timeline compared to most galactic civilizations. We are prepared to meet any reasonable requirements for membership, though we hope the Council will consider the unique circumstances of our situation." Representative Kixla of the Harmony Worlds raised a tentative question. "Ambassador, what assurances can you give that Earth will not use its apparent technological advantages to destabilize the galaxy?" "The same assurances any member gives," Minji replied calmly. "We seek peace, prosperity, and the advancement of all sentient species. However, we will not stand idle while others suffer under tyranny." The chamber remained silent as each representative contemplated the choice before them. They could accept humanity as an equal partner in galactic civilization, or risk facing them as an enemy. The voting chamber of Concordia Prime had witnessed many historic moments over the centuries, but nothing quite like this. Electronic voting panels glowed across the vast amphitheater as representatives from across the galaxy cast their decisions. The fate of interstellar politics hung in the balance with each recorded vote. Elder Quintar stood at the ceremonial podium, his ancient voice carrying the weight of history as he announced the preliminary results. "The motion to grant full membership status to the United Earth Government has received initial support from 43 member worlds." Ambassador Minji remained seated in the diplomatic section, her expression calm despite the magnitude of the moment. Behind her sat Captain June, a former hegemony naval officer who had chosen to serve Earth after his liberation. His presence alone spoke volumes about the changes humanity had brought to galactic civilization. The vote continued as smaller coalition worlds added their support. The Trade Federation voted yes after calculating the economic benefits of human rapid development techniques. The Harmony worlds supported membership after Earth's demonstration of liberating rather than enslaving conquered peoples. Ambassador Veldar of the hegemony sat in stunned silence as his once mighty empire crumbled around him. 3 of his own member worlds had already declared independence using human-supplied technology, and more were preparing to follow. The vote was becoming less about accepting Earth and more about managing the collapse of the old order. Current tally stands at 64 votes in favor, Elder Quintar announced, his voice betraying a hint of amazement. Never in Council history had a new species gained membership so quickly or with such overwhelming support. Representative Kixla of the Harmony World stood to address the chamber. We vote in favor not just because of Earth's military achievements, but because they represent something the galaxy has needed for too long. They show us that freedom is possible even against impossible odds. The final votes came quickly. The Spiral Coalition added their support, followed by the Independent Systems Alliance. Even some former hegemony allies switched sides, recognizing that the old empire was finished. Final vote count, Elder Quintar declared, his voice echoing through the silent chamber. 67 votes in favor, 3 opposed. The motion passes by the largest margin in Council history. The silence that followed was deafening. No cheers erupted, no celebration began. Every representative understood they had just witnessed the end of one era and the beginning of another. The galaxy would never be the same. Ambassador Minji rose slowly from her seat, her simple diplomatic robes contrasting sharply with the elaborate costumes worn by other representatives. She walked to the central podium with quiet dignity, Captain June following at a respectful distance. Members of the Galactic Council, she began, her clear voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. Earth accepts this membership with both honor and humility. We understand the responsibility that comes with this position. She paused, looking across the assembled representatives with eyes that had seen her world nearly destroyed and then miraculously saved. We never sought conflict with any galactic power. When the hegemony arrived at our world, we offered them the same thing we offer you today: friendship, cooperation, and mutual respect. Ambassador Veldar shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Minji continued. The hegemony chose differently. They demanded submission, threatened extinction, and forced us to defend ourselves. In doing so, they discovered something fundamental about humanity that we have carried in our hearts since our ancestors first looked up at the night sky. Captain June stepped forward slightly, his modified uniform bearing both hegemony medals of honor and New Earth insignia. His presence reminded everyone that even former enemies could find redemption and purpose in the new order. We refuse to kneel, Minji stated simply, her words carrying the weight of absolute conviction. Not to tyrants, not to overwhelming odds, not to anyone who would threaten innocent life. This is not arrogance, it is principle. Across the chamber, representatives from dozens of oppressed worlds leaned forward, hanging on every word. For centuries they had lived under the shadow of hegemony rule, believing that resistance was hopeless. Now they saw proof that even the mightiest empire could fall. To our new friends and allies, Minji continued, extending her hand in a gesture of welcome, we offer everything we have learned. Our technology, our techniques, our determination to see freedom spread across the stars. We will share freely with any world that chooses liberty over tyranny. The representatives from former hegemony colonies began to whisper among themselves, hope flickering in their eyes for the first time in generations. The galaxy's power structure was shifting, but towards something better than what had come before. But to those who would continue the old ways, Minji's voice grew colder, though she maintained her diplomatic composure. Remember what happened when the hegemony fleet arrived at Terra. Remember that humanity stands ready to defend not just our own world, but any world that calls for help against oppression. The chamber remained absolutely silent as the full implications of her words sank in. This was not just a diplomatic speech, it was a declaration of a new galactic doctrine. The age of unchallenged tyranny was over. As the session concluded and representatives began to file out of the chamber, conversations erupted in dozens of languages. News of the vote would spread across the galaxy within hours, carried by faster-than-light communications to every corner of known space. Within days, 17 more worlds had declared independence from hegemony rule. Within weeks, human technical advisors were teaching rapid development techniques to grateful populations across the galaxy. The revolution had begun not with armies or fleets, but with a simple idea that no sentient being should have to kneel before a tyrant. The galaxy would indeed never be the same, and for the first time in centuries, that was a reason for hope rather than fear.